Good evening. In January of 1979, the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, boarded a plane and fled his country forever. To the outside world, he was the unshakable peacock throne, an autocrat backed by a superpower. But on the inside, a combination of economic decay, a costly military, and a public that had lost all fear had made his rule impossible. History rarely repeats, but it often rhymes. Tonight we are hearing echoes of that collapse from inside the walls of the Kremlin. For years, the world has been told the Russian economy is resilient, that President Putin's control is absolute. We are now reporting that this narrative is collapsing. Russia is on the brink of a total crisis that is turning into a revolution. The cost of the war has reached unbearable levels. Losses can no longer be hidden. The economy is sliding toward collapse. The internet is being restricted, and the public's patience is running out. Criticism is rising from every corner, but it's no longer just the public. The Duma has turned against Putin, too. The Russian parliament, which for years approved Putin's every decision without question, functioning like a silent notary, has today become a battlefield. Members of parliament are shouting the truth at the president, a warning that if he doesn't take immediate action, financial, economic, and otherwise, then this fall, Russia will face what happened in 1917. The weight of these words, delivered by Russian communist leader Gennady Zyuganov, must be understood. This is not ordinary opposition rhetoric. Zyuganov is the head of the Russian Communist Party, the leader of the very party that carried out the 1917 revolution. And this man is now openly warning that the greatest uprising in his own party's history could repeat itself. A Communist Party leader warning against a communist revolution. This paradox alone reveals the gravity of the situation. Zyuganov addressed Putin directly from the podium. We have told you 10 times the economy is bound to collapse. If you don't take immediate action, financial, economic, and otherwise, then in the fall, we'll face what happened in 1917. This statement's significance lies not in its content, but in its source and venue. Zyuganov's party is considered systemic opposition, a controlled part of the political theater. For him to issue such a direct public threat in the Duma breaks the unspoken rules of that system, suggesting the private channels for expressing elite discontent have failed entirely. Let's focus on that phrase. We told him 10 times. This is not a concern being raised for the first time. It is the explosion of anger that has been building inside the Duma for months, perhaps years. Zyuganov has made this warning before, but now he is doing it openly, in front of millions, on the record. The message is clear. What we said behind closed doors didn't work. Now, let the world hear. And this warning isn't being heard in a vacuum. The Kremlin's most loyal propaganda weapon, Vladimir Solovyov, is reflecting the same fear, but from a completely different angle. Solovyov accused everyone complaining about internet shutdowns of revolutionary incitement on live television. Solovyov is trying to frighten the public, but in doing so, he is exposing the Kremlin's deepest fear. Revolution has genuinely become a possibility. The regime knows the stability narrative no longer works. That is why it has switched to the threat that instability would be worse. But when a regime starts threatening its own people with "don't make a revolution," that regime has already passed a critical threshold. And the anger over the internet, both in the Duma and on the streets, is not new. It has been building for months. When the platform Telegram was shut down in February, sharp criticism rose from within the Duma. Members of parliament openly accused the officials who imposed the ban of working for the enemy. The Kremlin's own parliament charged the Kremlin's own internet policy with treason. When a regime's own lawmakers call their own government traitors, internal dissolution has already begun. And this anger has only grown. Member of Parliament Gusev is now presenting a far more radical proposal to Prime Minister Mishustin, dividing Russians into verified and others for internet access. Verified citizens, those whose phone numbers are linked to the state portal, would have internet access. Others could be seamlessly cut off. This proposal alone shows how cornered the Kremlin has become. When a regime starts classifying its citizens as reliable and unreliable, that is a sign not of control, but of a loss of control. And the state polling company VTSIOM's own data confirms the picture. Putin's approval rating has dropped below 70% for the first time since the start of the full-scale invasion in 2022. In an authoritarian state, official polling is a performance of loyalty, not an accurate measure of opinion. A figure below 70%, therefore, is not just a number. It is a signal that the state is losing its ability to even project an image of overwhelming support. The real figure is almost certainly far lower. So what triggered this cracking? An Instagram video. 18 minutes, 13 million followers, and more than 30 million views. Victoria Bonya, known in Russia as a former reality show star, someone who for years had only shared beauty tips and lifestyle videos, addressed Putin directly. And what she said shook the Kremlin. The people are afraid of you. Artists are afraid. Governors are afraid. The people are like a coiled bow. And one day that coiled bow will snap. Bonya said she supports Putin, but claimed the truth was not reaching him. She spoke about internet shutdowns, environmental pollution, floods, and corrupt officials. And she said, ordinary people are being so squeezed by corrupt officials that they could one day revolt. This is the classic Russian safety valve. The Tsar is good, but his subordinates are the problem. But according to Putin's former speechwriter, Abbas Galamov, even this loyalist format of criticism is dangerous for the regime, because uprisings in Russia always start this way. First, loyal criticism, then the center starts to wobble. The Kremlin's response was noteworthy. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov acknowledged that Bonya's criticisms touched on very impressive topics. He insisted Putin is fully aware of what is happening in the country, but he did not reject the criticisms. This acknowledgement was an almost unprecedented step in Kremlin history, and it opened the lid. But the Kremlin's propaganda reflex was not far behind. State television's most powerful voice, Vladimir Solovyov, launched a full-scale war against Bonya on live TV. He hurled personal insults. He demanded she be declared a foreign agent. He requested Russia's top state investigator examine whether Bonya's outburst violated any laws. Solovyov's language was so degrading that it shocked even the Russian public. And Bonya hit back. She called Solovyov an enemy of the people, promised a lawsuit, and in an AI-generated parody, flung a web at Solovyov's face. 10 million views in 24 hours. Solovyov wanted to crush Bonya. He made her bigger, and Bonya did not remain alone. When a lid opens, a wave follows. A blogger named Isa supported Bonya to her 4 million followers. The video was later deleted, but the message had already spread. Ekaterina Gordon voiced the same complaints to her 2 million followers. Another influencer called out, "Let's not be afraid. We can only end this madness together." Putin's former speechwriter and political analyst, Abbas Galamov, summarized the situation clearly. Revolutions are not started by professional revolutionaries. They are started by people like Bonya, people nobody expected to speak up. A beauty influencer cracked the Kremlin's 26-year-old "everything is under control" narrative with a single video. But the anger spilling through the crack Bonya opened was not new. It had been building in every layer of society for years. Bonya just lifted the lid. The elites are in revolt. Russian business leaders met with Putin in March. They told him internet restrictions were making life harder for businesses and for people. They spoke of billions in losses. They demanded solutions. What did Putin do? He ignored the entire matter. The anger among business leaders who returned empty-handed is so strong that vast bulletin journalists Rustarova and Lutuva report the situation threatens to produce political consequences. The Kremlin's unwillingness to even discuss the issue has deepened this anger further. Soldiers are confessing. A former tractor driver from the front, now fighting as a tanker driver, spoke openly. "I'm not fighting for Putin. I'm fighting for money. We hate Putin. No moral values, no patriotism, just a paycheck." He says he doesn't even want to kill anymore, but would be left without money. And this confession is not isolated. Morale erosion in the army is confirmed in every source, from bloggers to frontline reports. Artists are speaking up. Actor Nikita Kukushkin said it plainly. "Let's be honest, Putin has been in power for 26 years. If the truth hasn't reached him for decades, that's not an error. That's a system." He called the start of the full-scale invasion the greatest tragedy in modern Russian history. For an actor in Russia to say this publicly, risking prison, shows how close the situation has come to the breaking point. And perhaps the most striking indicator, the public is fleeing. According to Yandex WordStat data, searches for moving abroad doubled in 3 months. 19,600 in January, 22,900 in February, 40,000 in March. Searches for moving to Belarus have exceeded 20,000 in recent weeks. People are researching moving costs, document requirements, and permanent residency conditions. The big wave of 2022 to 2023 resulted in 800,000 to 1.3 million Russians leaving the country. Especially the IT, engineering, and young educated segment had left. Now a new wave is forming, and it carries the same profile. Young, productive, skilled. The very people who would build a country's future. Elites, soldiers, artists, the public. The same signal is coming from every layer of Russia. This cannot continue. And beneath this societal cracking lies a very concrete foundation: the economy. The numbers do not lie. In a single week of April, Russians withdrew $3.2 billion in cash from banks. In just 17 days, this figure reached $6.2 billion. Total cash in circulation has now exceeded $263 billion. This mass cash withdrawal is a classic bank run in slow motion. It signals a catastrophic loss of faith, not just in digital payment systems, but in the state's financial stability itself. This behavior directly starves banks of the liquidity needed to fund government debt, creating a vicious cycle where public fear actively undermines the state's ability to finance the war. Why are so many people withdrawing their money from banks at the same time? Because trust is collapsing. Internet shutdowns are disabling credit cards. The Kremlin's new tax tracking plan is pushing people toward physical cash, and the public senses a crisis. Rather than trusting the banking system, they are putting money under the mattress. It is the classic boomerang effect of excessive control. The more the state tries to control, the more the public seeks escape routes. If this trend continues through 2026, it will lead to tens of billions of dollars in reduced bank liquidity, slower growth, higher refinancing costs, and a growing shadow economy. Analysts estimate this could cost Russia 0.7% of its GDP. And then there is the brain drain. Between 2022 and 2024, 80,000 to 100,000 IT specialists left Russia. This is not just a workforce loss. It is the loss of innovation capacity, tax revenue, and a technological future. Russia, already unable to make technological leaps under sanctions, is also losing its brightest minds. Remaining companies are forced to raise salaries, which fuels inflation further. Competition for workers between the defense industry and the civilian sector is intensifying, and both sides are losing. Putin himself was forced to acknowledge the situation this week. He complained about 2 consecutive months of economic contraction and demanded answers from officials about why things are going badly, asking, "Why isn't it working?" about an economic system he himself built over 26 years. That alone is a confession of how serious things have become. And when all these economic pressures combine with societal anger, the picture becomes dangerous. Zyuganov's 1917 warning is not for nothing. What destroyed the Tsarist regime in 1917 was the combination of military defeat plus economic collapse plus public rage. And Russia is currently showing signs of all 3 components. It is not 1917 yet, but it resembles the final months of 1916. Putin's reflex is always the same: silence the voice. And there is a recent example showing how harsh this reflex can be. A Kremlin-loyal blogger named Ilya Romeslo criticized Putin last month. A few days later, he was sent to a psychiatric facility. The message is clear: speak up and face the consequences. But there is a critical paradox here. Every silenced voice strengthens the perception that the Kremlin is hiding the truth a little more. They sent Romeslo to a psychiatric facility, and this incident pushed even more people to speak. Solovyov attacked Bonya. Bonya came back stronger, and 3 more influencers spoke after her. Silencing now creates a multiplier effect. Every act of repression births a new voice. And the Kremlin's next step is even more dangerous. Remember the verified citizen internet plan from the Duma, dividing Russians into reliable and others. If this plan goes into effect, Russia will take a step toward a North Korea model digital surveillance state. But controlling the flow of information in 2026 is not as easy as it was in the 1950s. Russians use VPNs, they reach Telegram, they open Instagram through illegal means. 13 million people follow Bonya on a banned platform, despite the ban. Taking back access once the public has had it is much harder. Once you have seen cat videos on Instagram, you cannot put that genie back in the bottle. Putin's other cards are weakening too. Propaganda figures like Solovyov have lost their credibility. The public trusts bloggers and influencers more than television. More soldiers? A new mobilization would make the public even more anxious. When mobilization was announced in 2022, hundreds of thousands fled the country. Economic reform? You cannot reform while financing a war. Nuclear blackmail? He has played this card for 4 years. Nobody takes it seriously anymore. Full support from China? Beijing will not risk sanctions. And the pattern needs to be seen here. In 2022, when mobilization was announced, hundreds of thousands of Russians fled. In 2023, the Prigozhin mutiny shook the regime. In 2024, economic pressures increased. In 2025, the front gradually worsened. In 2026, all these pressures are erupting simultaneously. Influencers, elites, soldiers, politicians, the public. Every year is worse than the last. Every crisis is deeper than the one before, and Putin's response to each crisis is weaker than the previous one. As Galamov put it, this is the slow accumulation of public anger that emerges before systems collapse. Russia will not storm the Winter Palace tomorrow morning, but the foundations of that palace are rotting a little more every day. Vanya said the people are a coiled bow. Zyuganov said 1917 will repeat. Soldiers said we hate Putin. Elites said we were ignored. And 40,000 Russians searched, "How do I flee the country?" in a single month. These are not separate complaints. These are different faces of a single truth. Russia's promise of stability is dead, and regimes do not collapse from the outside. They collapse from within. When soldiers lose their faith, when the public loses its trust, when elites turn their backs, and when even parliament uses the word revolution, that regime is approaching its final pages. When will the coiled bow snap? Nobody knows, but the bow is being pulled a little tighter every day.